So on to part 9 now, still working on the severed heads. So I've got a Payne's Grey in the gun again. There's not a lot of reducer in this mix, so that can create a really thick dark texture. So I can really start concentrating on introducing some contrast to the piece, sharpening up some edges. So just working my way around. Right here I'm using a straight edge from a cut out piece of cartridge paper. That's just to sharpen those edges around the belt, which I did say in previous videos that I'd start to introduce some sharper edges, which is I'm at that point now where I can actually start to bring some areas out and drop some areas back. So putting those defining lines in really helps with the depth of the image. So got some Indri ochre and some orange, so that mix is going to be for the faces. So I'm just once again doing another pass over just to introduce some more of that orange glow to the faces, which is obviously coming from the light source at the bottom right, which is the fire, which previously said it's out of frame, but the lighting is there. So just dusting over very, very lightly. I don't want to go too heavy on this. End up oversaturating it and you can end up losing some of your detail. So the trick is to go in really light, multiple passes, and then just scratching in some of those highlights again, just to really bring those back out again. It's best to do that while the paint's still drying. It's really easy to scratch as the paint's wet, so once that dries up it gets a little bit harder to erase. So timing is pretty important here. Be fairly quick. You see that's really added a nice little highlight to those edges. Really helps it to stand out. Such an easy process, but it's so effective. It really makes it stand out. So back into my sepia, and this is to start bringing the image down into that corner. So I wanted to get those heads done and detailed and coloured just to see where I was at before I started doing this, because this is a very washed out area, so there's a lot less detail here, and I've got to go a lot lighter with the sepia. I don't want to be going too dark with it, because I'm going to be introducing my firelight, which, like I said, does wash out the detail. So you'll see it when it's complete how that works. It's all about basic shapes in this area and slow build up. So the mix is over reduced again, as I've stated in previous videos. It just helps to make for a slow build up. I don't go too heavy straight away. But here I am just jumping around the place again, adding more detail to the hand. Using the Gerald Mendez texture stencils, which are super handy for creating sharp little textures like that. As I said in the previous video, still really struggling with the paint, the sepia and the Payne's Grey that I got constantly clogging. As you can see there, I had a bit of a blowout, so that had to be covered. So that was a constant battle, so I did struggle with this area. The good thing about this image is it's so detailed that you can hide a lot of mistakes like that. So all those little blowouts and little spots that shouldn't be there can actually just get blended in and you wouldn't even know. So what I'm doing, just every now and then just stepping back, looking at the picture from a bit more of a distance, and then looking at my reference, just seeing what needs to be done. So here I'm switching to the HPCH, just to, like I said, I was having a lot of issues with the airbrush, so I thought maybe just switching airbrushes for a while might give me some relief, but it never did. So but it's definitely worth a try. This airbrush has a bigger tip, so it'll allow paint to flow through it a lot more free than the HPSB, which is from memory a 0.18 nozzle. So this is a 0.3, I reckon. But it might be 0.23. I can't quite remember. It's bigger anyway. So trying to do the strands on this this rope was a struggle. With the airbrush running the way it was, I couldn't pull straight lines like I normally do, because it wouldn't give me a consistent line. I'd start the line and then all of a sudden there'd just be a blockage, which would just kill the line. So I'd try and blast that little blockage out and try and redo the line again. So I've got a new deep bruise purple, just to see how that ran, just to add a bit more of the transitional colour into that area, the bottom of the arm, because that side appeared to catch a little bit more of the moonlighting, which was coming from the left hand side. So I give the old bone white a go just to see if I could start introducing some highlights. But I did notice I was getting some significant blue shift here, even though the base had a fair bit of orange down on it. I think the purple that I'd introduced did cause a little bit of the blue shift when laying the white over top of it, but that's fine. It's easy enough to counteract just by coming back in over with either a little bit of sepia or some orange, which we'll get rid of it. Not completely, but it will it'll neutralise it a bit. It looked a bit odd, but that's alright. I wanted to introduce the highlights in the white here with the airbrush rather than scratching them in or erasing them in, because I wanted them to appear a bit softer. Like I said, I've said previously, scratching them in can make it appear a little bit sharp, so just wanted that soft touch to it. So here you can see I've dusted some of that blue violet over just to bring that light back in again. That knocks the white textures that I've just added back, and helps it to blend back into the whole image. So the blue shift that I got wasn't a major issue, obviously, because I'm introducing more blue over top of that, which blends it all in and pushes it all back. Back to the old bone white again, just to soften the edges of those that rope up, because it's quite frayed up the top there. So I wanted that to have a really soft look to it, and obviously adding some of those fibres in, that just freehand those loose fibres in. So obviously lost control of the focus here again for a short period of time. I don't think this lasts very long, so sorry about that. But just adding some white to those outside areas just to really highlight and bring it forward. So now I can knock some of these blue shift areas back that I from the white that I put in by laying some orange over top of it. So essentially just knocking it all back and making it look part of the whole image again, so it doesn't stand out so much. Been jumping around a lot because I was really struggling with that rope, so I kept having a break, jump to another area just to give myself a break and come back in when I felt right again. So sometimes it's best just to move on, go to a different area if you're getting too frustrated with one area, and just move on somewhere else, and maybe you'll have a bit more of a fresh mind when you come back to that area later on. Here I've got some of that red violet by the looks in the airbrush, so just introducing some of that those warmer colours to the sides of the faces there. So obviously there's a transition from the flames to the moonlight, so from the orange to the blue, and in between that I needed that red violet to create that transition between the two colours. And again, just bringing some of those highlights back in with the airbrush rather than scratching them in, just for that soft effect again. So, and it doesn't matter too much about blue shift in these areas because it's very well hidden from the detail, so it's not too much of an issue. So here I am trying to pre-mix my sepia, leave it sit for a while, and I was actually straining it into that little tub, and then straining it into the airbrush just to try and combat that dry the blockages, but still didn't work, unfortunately. But just trying everything. Got to give it all a go. But again, this sepia mix is fairly over reduced, so that I can gradually work these tones in, and also makes it harder to scratch details into it like that. So you scratch those details into it while the coat's fairly light, and then you can, as you're building it up over top of that, it still softens those textures up. So sometimes if you scratch really early on, all the subsequent coats after that will actually soften up those details anyway. But you've got to do do that erasing fairly early on while you've got a fairly light coat on there. So here I'm trying to be careful as well, not to introduce too much of that the overspray of the sepia across onto his chainmail and his suit, because that still is more of on the cooler side. That's got the Payne's Grey, and I'm yet to go back in and finish that up, but I wanted to get these heads done first so that I had something to contrast it with. So I've got to be careful of overspray here. So luckily I'm working very close quarters, so the spray is fairly minimal. I'm doing very, very light passes, and another way to combat that is to direct the spray away from that area, so you'll angle it towards the right a bit more. Also the use of freehand shields that you probably noticed me using before with the just the paper. Just cut them out, use them. That helps to give you a hard edge and stops your overspray. So just got to be careful how you use the templates. Basically, you don't want to be overusing them, and when you find you've got hard edges where you just don't need hard edges, you need the soft transitions. But that all comes with trial and error anyway. I've made those mistakes plenty of times. So here you see I'm erasing those details in fairly early, just so that as I progress that'll soften up. But it gives me those the lines to work with, so I know exactly where the detail is, and it gives me something to follow, guidelines. So that's another set of teeth. There's obviously a fourth head underneath that, but like I said, because it's pushed back in the background, it's got a fair bit of bright firelight over top of it. It's really pushed back and faded out in the background. So that's the effect I'm going for here. So that's why my mix is fairly over reduced, and I'm just slowly working in basic shapes down the bottom there. No exact details. And also you don't want any hard edges around that area either, because it's it's set back. You want it to have a bit of depth, so you do need some level of fuzziness to the image in the background there. Another good thing to note before I come to it is when I actually add my yellowy orange mix across over top of all of this, that'll really push that image back again even further. So because I've already set it up as a washed out kind of image, adding color on top of that again is going to wash it out even more, so it'll push it further back again, which is it was in the plan to begin with, so that's why I'm setting it up the way I am. If that makes sense. yeah, just using that fan tip paintbrush to try and sketch some of those hair fibres in, but yeah, it was probably a little bit dry to be doing that, so it didn't really have the effect I wanted. So, but that's fine. I can come back in and you know, with the airbrush and actually paint some of those hairlines in. It'll probably be better if I airbrush them in anyway, because it'll be a bit softer, which will suit the image a bit more. Knocking in some of those really bright spots, you know, just by erasing back to the base white. There on the reference, there actually seem to be embers from the fire coming up. So I'm just setting them up ready to put in some really bright yellow into those. As you can see, getting towards that bottom right corner, it's getting more and more washed out. Gets closer to the light source. Here, just adding some of that hair in, simply because it wasn't working that well by erasing, and also got the idea to wash that out even more by just spraying a really light coat of that old bone white across that bottom section, and that actually worked a treat. It really pushed that back even further, and just really washed it out. Great. So at some point I actually switched back to my old sepia mix. I think that was it there. I started using the old bottle that I hadn't quite finished, and yeah, the airbrush started running amazing again. So that's when I found out it was actually the paint batch that wasn't real flash. So I've since bought another batch that I haven't tried. So fingers crossed it's actually alright. I'm probably gonna have to chuck the other batch out that I bought in between, so which is a bit disappointing because they're pretty much almost completely full, both the sepia and the Payne's grey. It's just they're no good. So yeah, everything started running a lot better once I started using the older stuff, and this sepia from memory is probably about 4 or 5 years old, so the paint lasts really well. I mean, obviously I live in Australia, so the temperatures don't get too, I mean, the paints stay inside the house as well, so we do have extreme temperatures here, but being that the paints are in the house, they don't really see that extreme side of temperature. You know, we get up to plus 45 degrees Celsius here, so you know, if the paint was to sit in that, it'd probably go bad, but being inside the house, it probably doesn't even see much more than probably 30 degrees. And on the other scale of things, when we're in our winter, it gets pretty cold, you know, it gets down to 0 degrees Celsius, and paint doesn't see that side of things either, which isn't good for the paint either. But yeah, things started to speed up a lot more here when I started using the old sepia, so I really wished I'd continued using it a little bit earlier rather than trying to persist with the new stuff that I bought. But I had to test it out. I had to make sure it wasn't a problem with the airbrushes, so I had to do all the trial and errors and process of elimination to see what the issue was. So I'm happy I did that at least. Can't just give up on something. You see it's really starting to come to life here, adding all those little finicky textures in and little details. It really starts to bring that out. We're probably out of the now that the project's finished, and I've seen it many times just sitting there on my easel. Out of all of this, I'm probably the happiest with the severed heads. I think they turned out the best out of the whole piece, and actually pretty stoked with how it come out. So I'm not normally happy with 100% happy with what I do, because I see mistakes, but this is one of the few things that I was actually really happy with. It has the depth that I was hoping to capture, and the colours, the colours are there from the reference. So it has that real dynamic colouring to it. Some good depth as well. And then obviously down here, the subtleness of the background. But it pays to have a very good reference when you're doing a painting, especially a detailed one like this. Try and find the best reference that you can find. So even if you're not painting all the details in, it's just nice to have it, so you know exactly what's there and why it's there. So if you choose to leave it out, then that's your choice. And I've said in previous videos, you don't want it to look exactly the same anyway, because it's your own piece. You want it to have your little bit of a mark on it. So you don't copy it detail for detail. As close as you can is good, but add your own little thing to it. It's actually funny, I posted this to a Witcher page on Facebook, and admittedly I didn't put any of the progress pictures up with it this time, so I ended up getting accused of photoshopping it. So I did post it up again on a different page and made sure I put all the progress pics on. So but if anybody had cared to really look at it, they would have seen that it wasn't 100% the same as the original. it's pretty easy to spot that it was a, you know, was a painting, was a copy, because you know, the details were different, not everything was there, you know, my colouring was different. So, but you know, it's that's the internet for you. Some people like to discredit you for, you know, whatever reason, because they can. But you know, I didn't get too upset about it. I took it more as a compliment than anything. I thought, well, if they thought I'd photoshopped it, then it must mean I've done a pretty good job of it. So it's quite pleased with myself, to be honest, to get something that close that, you know, someone, you know, some people actually thought that I'd you know, photoshopped it. But you know, I videoed this just for the sole intent of, you know, making these videos just for, you know, just for the people who want to know how I went about it, and it probably turned out for the best, because the video actually turned out to be evidence that I did actually paint it. So, you know, I'm glad I decided to video it.